Hello, everyone. My name is Aplak. Hope all of you are keeping well. Today, I'm going to talk about something that's been running up my mind. And let me share my thoughts with you. And let's see what you think on this. Because for decades, technology promised a borderless world. And we've seen that in a very positive note. The internet connected economies, smartphones connected societies, cloud connected businesses, right? And technology is somewhat like akin to modern globalization, and it made it pretty much the bedrock of the modern world that we live in. But just look at what is happening in today's world. The world is actually moving in the opposite direction. I'll tell you why I mean by this. Countries are increasingly realizing that digital dependence can become a national vulnerability. Have you ever thought of this like this? We've been told that technology makes the world one unified place, right? But suddenly, with all these geopolitical climate changes, wars happening all over the world, you know, concepts like digital sovereignty, localization, sovereign AI, indigenous Texas ecosystems are becoming strategic priorities for countries, right? Because in the modern world, the most important infrastructure is no longer just oil, ports, or military bases. You have to see and understand this. It also includes, basic tech infrastructure like semiconductors, data centers, cloud infrastructures, AI models. So, net, in today's day and age, technology is now actually considered a geopolitical power, which is why nations are becoming increasingly uncomfortable with technology dependence. And we have to give it to China because they understood this much earlier than the rest of the world. We have to understand China just did not build was not just a manufacturing hub. Please understand this. And it was also not just confined to just building apps in the tech space. It built an entire parallel technology ecosystem. And instead of depending on Western platforms, China created its domestic tech ecosystem. You see, it's extremely independent of the world. You know, uh, for instance, I'll give you examples. Huawei became central to China's telecom priorities, right? Tencent became integrated uh, to their digital ecosystem, and Alibaba built cloud and commerce infrastructure, right? Big, giant organizations catering to one important aspect for uh, national consumption. So China understood something very, very early. Dependence eventually becomes leverage. This is where I like to get our country, India, into comparison. See, on the surface, everything looks good. India looks digitally very powerful, right? Massive internet scale, thriving startup ecosystem, world leading digital payments, growing AI ambitions. Everything looks hunky dory. This is where it's a wake up call. Because underneath all of this, much of India's digital ecosystem depends on foreign technology. That's the truth. Most, and correct me if I'm wrong, and would love to hear from you all on comments. Most smartphones phones run on operating systems from Google and Apple. Communication is dominated by platforms from Meta. Enterprise infrastructure runs heavily on AWS, Azure, Google Cloud. AI infrastructure is dominated by Nvidia, OpenAI, Google, Microsoft again, right? Yes, India owns the users, but does India own the underlying infrastructure? The answer is no. And this is where the contradiction lies. And you have to understand, and I'll give you one more example of how it's one thing to take oversimplified steps. I want it to make it sound really serious. One example that comes to mind is India banned. Do you remember India banned these Chinese apps citing national security concerns? Right? Do you think India realistically can afford to take similar actions against, in a hypothetical scenario, against these Western digital ecosystem today? The reason, A is not known, and I don't think so. Why? Because unlike Chinese platforms, large parts of India's digital economy are deeply integrated with Western technology infrastructure. And this is exactly where the strategic vulnerability lies. You know, it is not about saying that Western companies are bad or unsafe. You got to understand that. That would because it would oversimplify the matter. The real issue is strategic dependency itself, right? Any excessive technological dependence can become a strategic vulnerability, which brings me to an important point. Do you think I'm talking about making India self-reliant, self-sustainable, make in India program, so on and so forth? Yeah, but you have to understand one thing. This podcast is not about that, because reality is India cannot build a completely self-reliant digital ecosystem like China anytime soon. That's the reality. That is why India needs to take steps looking at technology beyond pure commercially and start looking at it strategically and diplomatically. What am I trying to say? And let me explain in the last part of my conversation. You know, India has built one of the world's strongest diplomatic balancing acts. You've seen that. India engaged with the US, Russia, Europe, Middle East, and Indo-Pacific bloc without being fully dependent on any single geopolitical power. I'm talking about political diplomacy, and that is strategic diplomacy, right? But technologically, India remains heavily dependent on the West. Therefore, in coming years, India may need something equally important as political diplomacy, and that's what we call as technology diplomacy. India already understands why overdependence can become risky. We saw that in the recent crisis of oil and the ongoing crisis of oil, right? We are over dependent on oil because 90% of it is getting imported, and therefore India is leveraging its diplomatic strength to address the situation. Right, India is balancing relationships, diversifying sources, increasing Russian oil purchases, and using diplomacy to protect its strategic interests. What I'm trying to say is technology may soon require the same approach. Because uh, you know, tomorrow's geopolitical challenges will completely change how we look at the changing world, right? India needs strategic technology autonomy, and this is where technology diplomacy becomes critical. India now needs more ways than one: a diversified technology partnerships, trusted digital alliances, and stronger control over critical digital infrastructure, but not spread only in the Western Hemisphere, but spread much more uniformly, right? Because in the future, geopolitical influence may not just come from controlling oil routes or other so-called critical resources. It may also come from controlling technology. What do you think of it? Let me know in your comments. I'll agree with you ahead.